I came home without warning after completing the last mission of my military life. I thought I'd hold my son in my arms after years apart, but instead, I found him dying alone in the intensive care unit. And my daughter-in-law, the one I trusted with our family, was partying on a yacht out at sea. I called, and she answered coldly, "Yeah, I'm busy. Talk later." I said nothing, then pulled out my phone and froze all of her accounts. And just 1 hour later, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating with the frantic chaos of someone who had ruthlessly left my son to die without peace. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Valentina Cole, 61 years old, a United States Marine Corps officer who served nearly 4 decades. I've been through more than a dozen war zones, faced gunfire, the smell of blood, and sand. But I never imagined the most painful moment of my life would arrive on a calm morning, right here at home. The plane from Washington landed in San Diego at first light. The first sunbeam slipped through the window and glinted off the pocket watch my father left me. He was a sailor who taught me, there's no mission greater than coming home with integrity. For 40 years I lived by that lesson. It's just, I forgot how far coming home had drifted from me. I walked out of the airport quietly, dragging an old military duffel across the concrete. People like to say retirement is when a soldier has to learn how to live again. For me, it was the journey to find the son I'd been away from too long. Miguel. I called a cab. The driver, a tangent-skinned man who looked like he'd served, struck up a friendly conversation. "You military? I can tell by those bags." I smiled. "Used to be. Now I'm just a mother trying to get home." The words tightened my throat. I had waited so long for this moment. I'd pictured Miguel opening the door, hugging me, saying he missed his mom. I even planned to cook his favorite chili beef, the dish I made when he was in high school. I imagined us sitting on the porch, watching the sunset slide over the ocean like the old days. The car rolled down familiar streets, palms swaying in the morning breeze. Coronado appeared after a curve, a quiet neighborhood where I'd bought Miguel a small house when he first married Valeria. I still remember that day. He hugged me and said, "I don't need anything else, Mom. I just want you to be proud." I laughed and told him he'd made me proud long ago. I didn't know that sentence would haunt me for the rest of my life. The cab stopped in front of 1245 Ocean View Drive. I paid, pulled my bag to the door. Everything looked just like my memory. A white fence, a small flower bed by the path, the wooden sign, the Coles, hanging a little crooked, but there were no sounds, no music, no voices. Only the ocean wind blowing through, cold and empty. I rang the bell. No one came. I called out, "Miguel, honey, I'm home." Only the distant thud of waves. I rang again, then tried the doorknob locked. I went around to the backyard and peered through the kitchen window. The house was pitch black. Wooden chairs were scattered. Cups and plates were a mess. The mailbox by the gate was stuffed with torn letters and flyers. It looked like no one had lived there for weeks. A cold draft brushed the back of my neck and made me shiver. A soldier's instincts told me something was wrong. Right then, a voice called behind me. "Mrs. Cole, is that you, Mrs. Cole?" I turned. It was Mrs. Harriet, Miguel's neighbor. A woman around 70, silver hair, purple sweater, watering can in hand. I walked over. "Oh, Harriet, I just got back this morning. Where's my son? Why is his house like this?" Her face went pale. She hesitated, then sighed. "You didn't know? Miguel was taken to the hospital 2 weeks ago. I heard it was an emergency in the middle of the night. The ambulance came close to midnight." I gripped her hand. "What about Valeria? My daughter-in-law? Why didn't anyone call me?" Harriet shook her head. "She was around the first few days. Then I saw her head out on a yacht with friends. Just yesterday, she posted party photos on Facebook at Newport Beach Marina. I thought you already knew." I went numb. My whole body turned to stone. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, each beat heavy and dry. I asked again, my voice gravelly, like wind through pebbles, "Are you sure Miguel is still in the hospital?" "Yes. Street. Raphael Hospital, downtown San Diego." I nodded, thanked her, and turned away. But my legs wouldn't move. The strength that had gotten me through battlefields seemed to dissolve. I stood frozen on the stone path, staring up at the window where Miguel once waved goodbye on his wedding day. The old curtain still hung there, but behind it was nothing, just a cold, empty, dark. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Valeria's name. I called. It rang and rang. No answer. I called again. This time, music and a woman's voice spilled through the speaker. "Yes, Mom? I'm busy. I'll call you back." "My son, where is he, Valeria?" "I heard he's in the hospital." There was a beat of silence. Then her voice floated back, light as air. Someone must be exaggerating. I'm offshore right now. I'll check when I'm back." And she hung up. I stared at the screen, the blue glow reflecting on my trembling hand. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the world around me. Part of me wanted to scream, but the other part just stood still, quiet, cold, and frighteningly clear. I pulled my bag onto the porch and sat on the steps. Noon sunlight slipped through the leaves and pooled on the stone where Miguel and I used to sit when he was 8. I still remember him asking, "Mom, when I grow up, can I be a soldier like you?" I laughed then and ruffled his hair. "You can be anything, as long as you never forget to come home." Now I was the one who hadn't come home soon enough. A gust of wind sent "The Coles" sign creaking. I stood, took one last look at the house, wilted flowers, a dry lawn, fogged windows, no trace of a home. I knew where I had to go. I rolled my bag back to the gate and waved for a cab. While I waited, I took out the pocket watch. The engraving on the lid was worn, "For those who always come home." The second hand kept sweeping, but for me, time had stopped. A taxi pulled up. The driver opened the door and asked, "Where to, ma'am?" I answered softly, each word like an order, "Street Raphael Hospital." "As fast as you can." We pulled away. San Diego slid past the window-familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. Every light pole, every row of trees made my heart heavier. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady my breathing, but Harriet's words kept echoing. "Your son's been in the hospital for 2 weeks." I looked down at the watch. The minute hand ticked forward 1 notch. 1 hour, that's all it took to go from the airport home, then from home to the hospital. Just 1 hour, and somehow my whole life had collapsed. I leaned back, tears falling before I knew it. I've watched comrades go down, but I've never felt a loss tear me apart like this. Not war, not an enemy, just the silence between people who were supposed to love each other. Outside, the sun was high. The ocean flashed silver blue. Somewhere out there, maybe Valeria was raising a glass on a yacht, laughing with friends. And me, a mother returning after 40 years of service, was racing across the city with a fear I'd never faced. That when I arrived, I wouldn't get to hear my son say, "Mom," one more time. Street. Raphael Hospital rose out of downtown like a giant block of concrete, cold and slick under the noon sunday. I walked into the main lobby. Disinfectant hung in the air while the PA called names in steady bursts. Nurses' rubber soles skimmed the floor, making the place feel like a barracks, impersonal, precise, disciplined. But inside that order, my heart thrashed like I was stepping into another war zone, the battlefield of loss. I stepped up to the front desk and set both hands on the cold counter. "Excuse me, I'm looking for a patient, Miguel Cole." The young nurse glanced up, scanned her screen, and said softly, "Intensive care, 5th floor, room 512. Just a number, and it crushed my chest. I nodded thanks and hurried to the elevators, a soft ding as the doors opened. The mirror inside threw back my reflection, a woman with graying hair and an old field jacket on her shoulders. Under the dim lights, my face was set, my eyes deep and dry as a desert. As the doors slid shut, I inhaled and tried to hold a steady breath. With each floor that passed, it felt like I was climbing down stair by stair into hell. On 5, the doors opened to a long white hallway, fluorescent lights casting a cold sheen on the tile. The monitor's beep-beep echoed everywhere, each beat a knife's edge. I walked slowly, my hand tightening around the pocket watch in my jacket, the last thread tying me to the past, to family, to the reason I came back. Room 512 was ajar. I nudged it open, and a blast of chilled air washed over me with the tang of disinfectant and metal. Miguel, my only son, lay there. He was so thin I had to grab the chair to stay upright. The thick black hair was now patchy, his skin was ashen. Tubes and IV lines ran everywhere, wrists, chest, nose. Every breath was a frayed thread. I barely recognized my boy. A primal fear surged in my chest. I'd seen men dying on battlefields, but I never imagined I'd see this, my son, fading away in solitude. Next to the bed, a middle-aged doctor was jotting notes. His badge read, "Julian Rivera, MD," I asked, voice shaking. "Doctor, my son, what happened to him?" He looked up, eyes tired, voice even like he'd said these words 100 times. "Are you the patient's family?" "I'm his mother." He nodded, closed the chart, and spoke quietly. "He has late-stage stomach cancer. By the time he was brought in, it had metastasized. We can only manage pain and sustain life. If he'd been treated earlier, he might have had another year or two." My head spun. "Cancer? Late stage?" I repeated like I'd lost my mind. He didn't answer. He just exhaled, a flicker of sympathy in eyes that weren't warm enough. "No one told me," I whispered. "No one called me." Julian lowered his voice. "We tried the registered family number, but no one answered. No one has visited in the past 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks while I was at my retirement ceremony, receiving a Medal of Honor. 2 weeks while Valeria, my daughter-in-law, was posting wine glasses from a yacht. I stood there with fists clenched so tight my nails broke skin. No words came. My throat locked. The tears wouldn't fall. I could only step forward and place my hand over my son's. His hand was ice-cold, thin, knuckles jutting like dry twigs. "Miguel," I whispered, voice breaking. "I'm here, baby. Mom came home." White light bounced across his face. His eyelids trembled. I leaned closer, so close I could hear my own ragged breath. "Can you hear me, honey?" His lips moved. I had to bend down to catch it. "Mom!" Barely a breath. "Mom, I love you." It felt like my heart shattered in my chest. I wanted to say, "I love you too," but my throat seized. I only gripped his hand harder, trying to pour my warmth into him. Suddenly, the monitor's beep stretched into a steady tone, a flat line slicing the air. The room went dead silent. "No, no, no, Miguel, baby," I cried, nearly collapsing. "Doctor." Julian slammed the code button. 2 nurses rushed in with a crash cart. They pulled me back. "Please step outside, ma'am." I shook my head, shouting, "No, I won't leave my son!" But they pushed me out and the door thudded shut, leaving me alone in the freezing hallway. Through the small window I watched them work compressions, meds, calling his name. It all blurred, waterlogged by tears. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Finally, Dr. Julian stepped out. He peeled off his gloves, face heavy. We did everything we could. I went still. No scream, no collapse. Just a vacancy spreading from my heart to the tips of my fingers. I turned toward room 512, the place where my son had just left this world. When the nurse pulled the white sheet over his face, I walked back in. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I sat beside the bed, lifted the sheet, and smoothed what little hair he had left. He looked peaceful, too peaceful, but I knew that last pain hadn't been gentle. I held his wrist the same place I held when I taught him to swim in Coronado, the same place I grabbed to pull him ashore when the waves were too strong. Now it was cold. "You're gone, Miguel," I murmured, voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I wasn't there when you needed me most." A faint draft from the vent stirred the curtain. The cold, white light felt like it was shining straight through my soul. I drew a deep breath, tears dropping onto his hand, then lifted my head. I'd learned in war that a soldier doesn't go down before the mission is complete. And now I wasn't allowed to fall because my final mission was to uncover the truth about my son's death. I pulled my phone from my jacket and wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand. The screen lit up, reflecting an old face with swollen eyes, yet the look had changed. No more despair, only a cold resolve. I opened the banking app. The words, "Joint account, Miguel and Valeria Cole" appeared. I stared for a few seconds, then tapped, "Freeze account." A prompt popped up. "Are you sure?" I pressed, "Yes." The screen flashed. "All linked accounts have been frozen." I closed the phone, my hand trembling slightly. But for the first time in hours, I felt myself breathing. Not because I was relieved, but because I had begun to fight. Outside, the sun was sinking behind the hospital, washing the glass with orange light. A nurse passed and gave me a small nod, but I didn't answer. I just stood there, looking at the white sheet on the bed where my son once laughed, once lived, and now only silence remained. I laid my hand on the sheet and whispered, "Rest now, baby. I'll take care of the rest." Then I turned away and walked out of the intensive care unit, each step heavier with pain, but inside me, a fire had been lit. This time, I wouldn't fight for the military. I would fight for my son's justice. I don't remember how long I stood outside the recovery room after the nurse pulled the white sheet over my son's face. The fifth-floor hallway was still bright, but to me that white light felt piercing, cold as metal. People walked past, chatting, chuckling softly, as if nothing had just happened, as if Miguel's death were just another line item in the end-of-day report. I left the ICU and walked down the hall to a row of seats by the window. Outside, the sky was tipping toward evening, the sunset tinting the glass red. My hand trembled as I set my phone on my lap. I took a deep breath and called Valeria. It rang a few times. Then an electronic dance track burst on, loud, busy. Laughter, clinking wine glasses, waves crashing mixed into the beat. On the other end, Valeria's voice came light, flat, distant. "Yes, Mom? What's going on?" I swallowed. My voice came out hoarse. "Miguel is gone." Silence for a few seconds. I could hear the ocean wind, people cheering, and then she spoke again, calm to a frightening degree. "Yeah? I'm busy. Talk later." A dry click. The call ended. I sat still. The hallway noise faded. The world around me stopped in a silence so deep it felt eerie. Only my heartbeat remained pounding, sharp with pain. I stared at the phone screen. The words, "Call ended," lit up, then went dark. I didn't cry. I couldn't. A mother had just lost her child and still had to hear her daughter-in-law talk about her husband's death like it was nothing. I leaned my head against the wall, letting the cold sink into my skin. Images crossed over each other in my mind. Miguel as a little boy laughing hard while I taught him archery on the beach. Miguel at 15, hugging me tight when I got orders for the Middle East. Miguel on his wedding day, looking at Valeria with total trust. Now those memories felt like film being burned, only ash left. A slight shiver went through me. I muttered, mostly to myself, "If she can be that cold, I'll be colder." I stood, straightened my jacket. Air from the vent lifted the hem like a reminder that I still had something to do. On the first floor, I found the administrative office. A young staffer met me with tired eyes and asked, "How can I help you, ma'am?" I'm here to collect the personal belongings of patient Miguel Cole. He nodded, stepped away for a few minutes, then returned with a clear plastic bag. These are the patient's belongings. We've inventoried them: wallet, watch, phone, IDs. I took the bag with both hands, afraid I might drop the whole world. Through the cloudy plastic, I saw a worn brown leather wallet, the gift I gave Miguel when he turned 20. A silver wristwatch with a scratched crystal. I remembered it was a discounted piece he bought after his first paycheck, proud enough to show me on a video call. And the phone with the cracked corner, the one he used to send me the last photo. He and Valeria smiling in front of the new house. I gripped the bag until my fingers went white. Each item was a blade cutting deep, yet forcing me to hold on, because they weren't just keepsakes, they were witnesses to the weeks he'd been abandoned, and to Valeria's brutal indifference. The staffer hesitated. "We also have the medical file, if you'd like to take it." I nodded. A few minutes later, he brought a thick stack of papers in a hard folder. "All treatment info, test results, admission dates. Please sign here." I signed. The pen shook because my hand wouldn't steady. When he left, I sat on a plastic chair by the door and opened the file. The first page read, "Patient, Miguel Cole. Diagnosis, stomach cancer, stage 4. Admission date, April 6th. Emergency contact, Valeria Cole, spouse." I stopped at the last line, "No visitor record." I closed the file and stared. 2 weeks, 2 full weeks with no one by my son's side. No one holding his hand, no voice saying, "Stay strong." I'd sent Valeria money regularly, believing she was caring for him. But now it was brutally clear that money never bought even a minute of genuine love. I stood, took the bag and the file, and walked outside. The afternoon sun hit hard enough that I had to squint. People streamed past the hospital entrance, busy, living, laughing, kissing each other goodbye, while I stood there with a bag holding what was left of my child. A sea breeze carried salt and gasoline. I lifted my head to the sky, feeling a thin fog drift over my eyes. Miguel was gone, but I knew my fight had just begun. I sat on a bench by the entrance and opened the bag. I laid each item across my lap. The leather wallet, there was a small dried blood stain at the corner. I opened it and found a few neatly folded bills, a bank card, and a small photo. Me and Miguel in front of the old house in Coronado, both smiling bright. The photo was worn, the corners curled, but Miguel's eyes were still shining, as innocent as ever. I brushed a finger over his face and whispered, "Rest easy, baby. I won't let it end like this." I slipped the photo into my pocket, then picked up Miguel's phone. The screen was cracked, but it lit when I pressed the power button. The passcode was his birthday, I knew it, so the screen opened on the first try. The recent calls were all banks, clinics, and a few unread texts. Not a single call from Valeria. I opened the first text. "Your payment of $3,500 has been received. Yacht Club Marina." I read it slowly, each word heating inside me. One question rose. While my son was hospitalized, what exactly was she spending money on? I closed the phone and put it away. When I looked up, the sunset was almost gone. Palm shadows stretched across the pavers, pulling in the evening chill. I held my father's pocket watch and felt the steady tick, the rhythm of time, of unfinished business. A nurse walked by and asked quietly, "Do you need anything else, ma'am?" I gave a weak smile. "No, thank you. I just need a few minutes to say goodbye." She nodded and moved on. I stood and slowly made my way to the hospital gate. With each step, my heels echoed on the cold concrete like a slow drum for a farewell. I stopped at the sign that read Street Raphael Medical Center. Yellow light washed over the metal letters so they glowed in the dusk. I spoke softly, almost like a vow. "Son, I promise, she won't touch another dime." I turned and walked away. My shadow stretched across the ground, fading into the last strips of sunlight. In my hand, the plastic bag rustled a small sound heavier than any load I'd carried in 40 years in uniform, because this time I wasn't carrying a weapon or orders. Only the pain and the resolve of a mother who had been betrayed. Night fell, San Diego's sky hazed with a thin mist, streetlights laying gold down the quiet road. I went back to Miguel's house, the place that used to be his home. 40 years in the military taught me to face anything, war, casualties, fear, but tonight, all I felt was cold and empty. The old key in my pocket felt like a rock. When it slid into the lock, the dry click broke the stale air, heavy with damp and old wine. One deep breath wasn't enough to push back the rot, the smell of abandonment. The room was black. Porch light leaked through the window and drew long gray streaks across the floor. I flipped the switch. A weak yellow bulb flickered and came on, revealing a scene that squeezed my heart. A lipstick-stained wine glass on the table, a moldy pizza box left to rot, a perfume bottle rolling under the sofa, and dust so thick on the floor my footprints were printed clear where I'd stepped. There was no sign of illness, no care, no nights spent sitting up for someone you love. Only the leftover trash of parties and a guilty silence. On the table, buried under fashion magazines and loose papers, a stack of documents had slipped out. Heavy stock, stained with dried wine, printed with numbers that chilled me. The first bill was from Marina Bay Charter Service, 3-day yacht rental, $148,000. Next page. Cartier Beverly Hills diamond necklace, $192,500. After that, Hotel La Valencia Presidential Suite, $29,000. Every page carried the same line. Paid by Miguel Cole. The numbers lined up neat and cold, like a verdict. I paused at the payment dates. My heart dropped. All of them matched the time Miguel was in the ICU, fighting for his last breaths. My eyes burned, but I wouldn't let myself cry. Feelings were useless now. I quietly pulled out my phone and photographed each bill, each number. The screen's light washed over my shaking hands and threw my aging face back in the window, a mother turning pain into evidence. At the end of the stack, a thin envelope was partially folded. Inside was a bank payment confirmation with Valeria's digital signature. A small note in the corner. Emergency authorization, paid with Miguel's card. Emergency, I almost laughed, a sound as dry as a spent shell. The irony of calling a yacht party an emergency. A cold draft cut through the cracked window and stirred the dusty curtain. On the table, a half-empty bottle tilted and rolled a little, making a faint clink. I looked around. Everything bore Valeria's mark. Heels tossed on the floor, a lipstick tube under the chair, a silk scarf thrown over the armrest. Everything suggested a woman living in luxury, but in this house there was no trace of Miguel's warmth. By the bookshelf, a brown leather journal lay still. I opened it and knew the handwriting instantly, my son's. The first page was neat. February. Valeria said she needed $30,000 for medicine. March. $50,000 to pay hospital bills. Insurance suspended. April. $40,000 to fix the roof. In the margin, a small note with ink blurred by water. She promised she'd pay me back when I get better. The date was 3 days before he was admitted. A sharp ache rose to my throat. Each line felt like a knife pressing into my palm as I held the journal. Miguel still trusted her to the very end, while his money was buying champagne and diamond necklaces. I didn't want to turn the page, afraid the next lines would kill whatever faith I had left in my son's marriage. But something in me pushed me to read on. Near the end, Miguel wrote, "Mom, I'm scared. Valeria has changed. She's hiding something and I don't dare ask. If I don't make it, please tell Mom I tried my best." The last line was smeared, like his hand shook too hard to write more. I set the journal down, held my head in both hands, and sat in silence. Outside, the far-off waves sounded like a faint heartbeat still echoing in memory. After a while, I stood and opened the desk drawer. In the back was an old laptop, scuffed screen, dusty. I hit the power button, and the fan whirred to life. The password was Miguel's birthday 0817. The screen lit up, reflecting my hollow eyes. The email sent folder showed a string of messages. At the top was one titled Yacht Party, full booking confirmation. Sent from Valeria's address, paid with Miguel's card. I read every confirmation line, every e-signature, every charge. There wasn't a hint of hesitation. She knew exactly what she was doing and knew no one would check, because the only person who could have noticed was lying between life and death. Another attachment was labeled Menu and Guest List. I opened it. First line, Champagne Armand de Brignac, 20 bottles, more than 30 guests, all names I didn't know. I saved everything. The cold light from the screen washed over my face until the whole room felt steel gray. What I felt wasn't rage anymore, it was a cold, absolute resolve. As I stepped away from the desk, a glint in the cabinet corner made me stop. A frame lay face down, glass cracked. I picked it up. It was a wedding photo. Miguel smiling gently, Valeria leaning on his shoulder, eyes sweet for the camera. On the back, a handwritten line, "To my forever partner." I let out a quiet laugh. No sound, just bitterness stuck in my throat. The night deepened. Moonlight slid through the curtains, tracing the stained walls where my son's memories used to hang. I moved through the house, collecting every piece of evidence. Bills, photos, notes, emails. I saved it all into one folder on my phone and named it simply For Miguel. When I finished, I sat by the window. Outside, the sea hummed low, the familiar sound of Coronado, where my son grew up. I opened the leather journal again, my hands shaking as I read the last line. "Mom, if I don't make it, please forgive me for loving the wrong person." My throat tightened. I ran my fingers softly over the line, then closed the journal and spoke to the air, barely above a whisper. "No, Miguel, I won't forgive her. Not yet." I stood and stepped out of the house. The ocean wind hit hard, mixing the smell of wine with jasmine from the front yard. Yellow light washed across the half-broken "The Coles" sign. The remaining letters swung in the wind, creaking with a sad little groan. On the empty street, my shadow stretched long across the ground, dragging along pain and silence. In my hand, my father's pocket watch kept ticking tiny beats cutting through the night, like a countdown to what was coming. I stopped at the gate and looked back at the house drowned in darkness. Every door, every curtain frame told its story in the quietest way, the story of a man betrayed in his own home. I gripped my phone and looked down at the photos I'd just saved. Bills, the journal, emails, social media, it was all there. Every detail enough to prove one truth. Valeria wasn't just careless, her greed and lies cost Miguel his life. A gust blew through, cold and strong, lifting my hair. I inhaled and squared my shoulders. From here on out, everything would be different. I was no longer the grieving mother who had just lost her son, but the woman who would make justice speak. And that night, in the sound of waves and the sting of salt, I knew one thing for certain. Valeria had no idea she'd picked the wrong person to cross. It was nearly dawn when I got back to the motel near the Coronado docks. The room's yellow light spread faintly across the mirror, where my face stared back older, harder, quieter than ever. Every muscle was still braced like the years I wore a uniform, not a single minute allowed for weakness. But what I was about to do tonight wasn't in any military training manual. I made a cup of black coffee and set my laptop on the wooden desk. The screen lit my face while the phone lay still beside it, contacts open to a familiar name, Javier Ortega. He was an old friend from my Afghanistan years, a military finance specialist who, after discharge, kept working at the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. If anyone could help me with this, it was Javier. I drew a deep breath and hit call. His voice came low and slightly raspy on the line. Valentina? Lord, I thought you dropped off the map. I just read about your retirement ceremony. Congrats, Lady General. I didn't answer with a laugh, just a sigh. Nothing to celebrate, Javier. I need a favor, and it's serious. The shift in my tone made him go silent at once. Typing sounds stopped. What happened? I told him. Every detail. From Miguel's death to the yacht invoices, the social media photos, the party emails. I spoke slowly, skipped nothing, kept emotion out of it. When I finished, all I heard was his heavy breathing. Miguel was your son? He asked again, voice tight. Yes. I'm so sorry. I don't need sorry, Javier. I need justice. Silence for a few seconds. Then he spoke softly, almost like a vow. Okay. Tell me what you need me to do. I opened my bag, took out the file I'd compiled, and sent every image and copy through the old encrypted channel we used in the service. The password was still our team's mantra, honor never sleeps. Can you verify my power of attorney? I asked. Yes. I still have the old authorization from Miguel, from when he did civilian logistics at Coronado. It's valid, no one revoked it. I heard the keyboard again, that cold, familiar sound, the sound of action. You're sure? Javier asked. If I enter this order, every account under Miguel and his wife's names will be frozen. Sub-accounts, credit cards, everything. I'm sure. He exhaled and kept typing. All right. Give me 10 minutes. I checked my father's pocket watch. The second hand crept. Each tick felt like a tight heartbeat in the silence. Outside the window, the ocean wind was strong. The curtain lifted, and the hot coffee on the table trembled. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. An encrypted message popped up. Status. Accounts frozen. Action completed. Ortega. That was it. No sirens, no gunfire, no smoke, but I knew a war had begun. Right after, the phone buzzed again. Valeria's number. I stared at the glowing screen in the dark, my fingers steady. I hadn't planned to answer, but the ringing kept on, and on the 5th round I tapped accept. Her voice cut in sharp as metal. Are you insane? I said nothing. You had no right. That account is mine. I'll sue you. Still silent. Her pitch rose, starting to shake. Are you hearing me? I need money. It's an emergency. I let her talk, listening only to her frantic breathing. Then suddenly, her tone softened, velvety. I'm sorry. I panicked. I need money for hospital bills. Can we talk? Hospital bills? I almost laughed. You should ask your husband about hospital bills, I said quietly, my voice so cold and steady it surprised even me. What are you saying? Your husband doesn't need hospital bills anymore, Valeria. He's gone, and don't ever call me again. I hung up and let the long, empty tones stretch through the room. The coffee had gone cold. The bitterness in the air matched the taste of my anger. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. It starts the moment you dare to speak the truth someone else keeps running from. Have you ever had to stay calm in the face of betrayal? Share it with me in the comments, so anyone who's been there knows they aren't alone. That night I chose to act like a soldier trained to survive chaos. Don't cry, don't wait, just move. I went back to Miguel's house with a lock change kit. Front door, back door. Even the windows I swapped every lock, each turn of the screwdriver ringing firm like my heartbeat coming back online. On the door I placed a seal. Property of Military Finance Department, under review. Neighbors glanced over, surprised, but no one asked. I knew they were scared. In the military we say, when a soldier comes home without a smile, it's best not to stand in their way. When I finished, I brought Miguel's bag inside and set it on the table. His silver watch sat under the light, the crystal flashing like a thin blade. I opened my laptop, hooked up a drive, and started backing up everything from his computer emails, notes, bank transactions, photos. Each file stored and encrypted the way I'd taught young troops to protect data in the field. Keys clacked steadily, never stopping. Outside, wind whistled through the frame and carried salt air, but I didn't feel cold. I felt wide awake. In the middle of the night, my phone lit up again. A stream of messages from Valeria poured in. "You'll regret this. I have friends-in-law. I'm sorry. I overreacted. Please, I need money urgently. Can we talk?" The lines danced on the screen, mixed with pleading emojis and fake hearts. I watched them for a long moment, then locked the screen. No reply, no emotion. Only one rule in my head: don't negotiate with a traitor. Close to 3 a.m., the last backup finished. I closed the laptop and leaned back. On the table, papers, bank cards, and Miguel's leather journal lay side by side like a formation ready to deploy. Outside, the ocean started to kick up. I could hear the water hitting the rocks like the nights I patrolled the Pacific, just me and the wind. In the dark, anything can be an enemy except resolve. I poured more coffee and looked out at the window glowing with first light. Thin rays slipped through the haze and fell across the line. I'd written in my notebook, "Day 1 without Miguel. Day 1 of being a soldier again." On the table, my father's pocket watch ticked evenly. I flipped it open and read the engraving. "For those who always come home." For the first time, I understood it completely, because this time I wasn't coming home to rest. I came home to fight not with a gun, but with the truth. I stood, shut the laptop, and looked around the quiet room. On the door, the military seal caught the morning light like a warning. I inhaled and felt my blood heat up again, each beat strong, decisive. A new war had begun, and I knew there are battles a soldier wins with mind and will no gunfire needed. The next morning, San Diego's sky was steel gray. Thick clouds drifted over the water, reflecting a cold silver. I sat in the car, hands on the wheel, staring at the glass building ahead, Attorney Armando Ruiz's office. A hard gust snapped the flag out front. I breathed deep and reminded myself, this wasn't just a family matter anymore. It was a case that needed daylight. I'd heard Ruiz's name from Javier Ortega. He'd been a special prosecutor in family financial abuse cases, a man who feared no power and took no pity on people who played weak. In the past, he'd helped many veterans reclaim assets stolen by relatives. Now, I just hoped he was tough enough to go the distance with me. I pushed through the door. The office sat on the 3rd floor of a modern building, big glass walls facing the shore. Dim light slid over shelves, packed with files. Coffee mingled with the smell of new paper. A young assistant led me into a conference room where Armando Ruiz stood waiting, tall, salt and pepper hair, a fitted gray suit, eyes sharp like someone used to reading truth through lies. "Mrs. Cole?" he said, offering his hand in a gravelly voice shaped by too many trials. "I'm Valentina," I answered, gripping firmly enough to make him raise an eyebrow. "We Saturday." I set 3 neatly bound files in front of him. "Everything I have," I said. "Bank statements, spending invoices, messages, and my son's journal." Ruiz opened each binder. His eyes moved fast, pausing to mark pages. He lifted a brow at the yacht bills. "The same day he was in the ICU?" "Yes." "And paid with his card?" "All of it. I have bank confirmations." He nodded slightly, pulled out a red pen, and began marking page after page, his voice steady like he was drafting a verdict. Enough to charge financial abuse, misappropriation, and possibly spousal fraud. I stayed quiet, looking at my hands on my knee. The knuckles stood out, but I'd never felt them stronger. "Can you help me?" Ruiz looked up. His eyes weren't those of a lawyer counting hours. They were the eyes of someone who understood silent pain. "I can, but you'll need to be ready for a long, dirty fight. Someone like Valeria won't fold. She'll cry, she'll beg, she'll say you're out for revenge." I gave a small smile with no warmth. I'm not seeking revenge, Mr. Ruiz. I want justice to be called by its name. He studied me a few seconds, then nodded. All right, let's begin. He pulled a dark blue folder from a drawer labeled Case Preparation, Financial Abuse. His voice shifted into the cadence of a man who'd led many cases. First, I need the attending physician's statement confirming Miguel's condition on admission that he wasn't capable of managing his finances. I can get it from Dr. Julian Patel at Street Raphael. He witnessed my son's final days. Good. The more detail, the better. Exact admit time, any coma notes, anything proving he couldn't authorize transactions. He wrote, then turned a page. Next is freezing all of Valeria's assets, house, car, savings. Will rely on your authority to manage the estate as mother and legal heir since Miguel died intestate. I'll draft the motion now. He looked at me, waiting. I nodded without hesitation. Do it. Every dollar I sent my son was earned with sweat. I will take it back, not for the money, but for his honor. Ruiz wrote quickly, his voice even, not needing to look at the page. Honor money can't buy that. And you, Mrs. Cole, aren't just reclaiming money. You're reclaiming your son's honor. A chill ran down my spine. He wasn't being cliché. His words hit the deepest part of me, the part that believed in a soldier's honor, in a vow to protect what's right. When the papers finished printing, Ruiz slid them to me and pointed at the last line. Sign here. From now on, Valeria's assets will be temporarily frozen pending judgment. She'll be notified within 3 days. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. Signing that form didn't feel like a legal action, it felt like declaring war. Ruiz gathered every document into a hard folder, then looked up at me. I need you absolutely silent until the file reaches the court. If Valeria reaches out, don't react. Let her expose herself. People like that, once they lose access to money, show us who they really are. I nodded slightly. I learned that on the battlefield. When the enemy panics, you just stand still. Ruiz gave a faint smile, rare amid all the files. I don't think I've ever had someone talk to a lawyer like they're planning an operation, Mrs. Cole. Old habits die hard, I said, low. When I stepped out of the office, late sun was hitting the distant shore. Waves slammed the breakwater, light shattering into silver shards. I stopped and drew in the familiar salt air. Everything seemed to slow, but inside me, something was moving strong, organized, like a unit being called to formation. My anger wasn't boiling anymore. It had cooled, heavy and sharp, like steel forged in fire. I knew exactly what I was doing, step by step. My stride was firmer as I left the building. In the sun, my shadow stretched long on the sidewalk, back straight, shoulders open, not a grieving mother anymore, but a fighter with a target. In my head, Ruiz's words replayed, "You're reclaiming your son's honor. Yes, honor, not with tears, but with justice." When I reached the car, my phone buzzed a text from Javier Ortega. "Heard you're working with Ruiz. He's good, but cold. Stay strong, Valentina. This war has no bullets, but it has consequences." I smiled. Wind moved through my hair, carrying the ocean's salt. I looked out toward the horizon, where the water flashed like broken mirrors. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Valeria, not of court, not of being isolated. I feared only one thing, that if I didn't act, Miguel would be buried forever in silence. I started the engine. The low, steady rumble sounded like a heartbeat coming back to life, like a soldier returning to the fight. Ahead of me, sunset spread across the sea. And in that light, I whispered, "Son, I've started. This time, I won't back down." On the first day of the hearing, San Diego lay under a gray rain. The sky was heavy, droplets clinging to the car windows like a thick curtain. I sat in the back row, hands clasped on my knees, eyes fixed on the county courthouse, a white building with wide steps, tall stone columns, and the American flag snapping in the damp wind. Every step I'd take today, I knew, would be the first in bringing my son's honor back. Ruiz met me at the gate. He wore a black suit, hair silvered and a bit wet from the mist. "You holding up, Valentina?" I answered softly, my voice strangely calm. "Better than ever." He nodded, opened his case, and checked the file one last time. "Everything's ready." The judge called an expedited hearing because the accounts are in dispute. Today we only need enough evidence to maintain control over the estate. I squeezed his hand lightly. I don't need a win. I need the truth to be heard. He gave me a look that said more than any comfort could. Inside, the courtroom air was thick. Rain tapped the dome while spectators murmured. When the back door opened, Valeria walked in designer black dress, soft curls, makeup crafted to look tired and grieving. But the flicker at her lips told a different story. She glanced at me, then looked away and glided to the defense table. Her lawyer, a young man in a bright red tie, nodded to the judge and said crisply, "Your Honor, my client is in deep emotional distress after her husband's death." Ruiz didn't look over. He stood straight, his words clear and clipped. "And your client contributed to that death." The room froze. I could hear my own breathing. The judge, a stern-eyed, middle-aged woman, tapped her gavel. "Mr. Ruiz, present your evidence." Ruiz opened his laptop, connected to the big screen behind him. The projector light filled the space, reflecting off the wall and every face watching. He spoke slowly, with the force of someone who'd tried hundreds of cases. Exhibit 1, the bank statements of the deceased, Miguel Cole, who passed on April 18th. Every transaction from the start of the month through admission was executed by his wife, Valeria Cole. Total spending over 3 weeks is nearly $450,000, including yacht rentals, jewelry, and luxury hotels. Valeria smirked softly and leaned toward her lawyer, as if this were all a misunderstanding. Ruiz went on, Exhibit 2, public social media posts and photos by the defendant during the same period. Please look. On the screen, Valeria appeared red wine in hand, sunlight on tan skin, beaming among friends. The caption beneath read, "Freedom feels good." Ruiz said, "Taken on April 10th, the day Miguel was admitted in critical condition." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's eyes cut to Valeria, cold. She dropped her gaze, lips trembling, still trying to look composed. Ruiz clicked to the next slide, the statement from Dr. Julian Patel. He read evenly. Patient Miguel Cole admitted with terminal gastric cancer. No family present. If treated earlier, prognosis could have been at least 12 additional months. The room fell silent. Only the rain kept ticking against the windows. Ruiz turned to the judge, voice low. "Your Honor, we are not asking for sympathy. We ask one simple question. While her husband lay dying, why was the defendant partying on a yacht with his money?" The judge tapped the gavel lightly. "Mrs. Cole, would you like to make a statement?" I stood. My hands were steady, my voice was low but clear. "I don't want revenge. I don't want payback. I want to know, does anyone deserve to be left to die like that? A man who trusted, who loved, who gave his life to someone, only to leave this world alone while his wife raised a glass at sea? No one spoke. Ruiz gave me a slight nod, a quiet steadiness. Valeria's lawyer jumped up, straightening his tie, words rushing out as if silence itself would sink them. "Your Honor, this is emotional speculation." The account funds were marital property. The defendant had full rights to use them. Mr. Cole's death is tragic, but his illness was incurable. My client was simply trying to go on living. That is not a crime. The gavel cracked once more. "Order. Call Dr. Julian Patel." The rear door opened. Dr. Patel walked in wearing a white coat, face set. He stood at the witness stand, took the oath, then looked straight ahead. Mr. Miguel Cole arrived in the ER with severe blood loss and profound weakness. If treated earlier, he could have lived at least one more year. I should add, when asked about family, he said, "My wife is busy." The courtroom went dead quiet. Each word dropped like metal on stone. My chest tightened, but I stayed upright and stared at Valeria. She wouldn't meet my eyes, hands gripping each other until her knuckles went white. Ruiz stepped forward. "Dr. Patel, during the patient's stay, did anyone visit him?" "No one." "Thank you." He turned to the judge with a slight bow. "That concludes our presentation. We request a temporary order to freeze all disputed assets to prevent transfer or concealment." The other side reacted hard. The young lawyer sprang up, voice sharp. "Objection! There is no proof my client intends to avoid financial responsibility." Ruiz lifted an eyebrow. "If burning through nearly $500,000 while her husband is dying isn't avoidance, then what is?" A small "oh" rolled from the gallery. The judge struck the gavel harder. "Order in the court." Then she looked directly at Valeria. "Mrs. Cole, do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Valeria swallowed, trying to hold it together, but her voice shook, edged with spite. "I loved my husband. I couldn't stand seeing him in pain. I needed a little time to escape it. I did nothing wrong. It was our money, and I wanted to keep living." The judge's face didn't change. She looked back over the file, then tapped the gavel. After reviewing the materials, testimony, and exhibits, the court issues the following temporary order. Freeze all assets of Valeria Cole. Grant estate and account control to Mrs. Valentina Cole pending further hearings. The gavel struck 3 clean times, ending the session. Valeria shot up, screaming, "You'll regret this! You can't steal my life from me!" 2 officers moved in, took her by the arms, and led her out. Her heels cracked against the stone floor, tangled with sobs and pointless curses. I stayed seated, no gloating, no joy. Only a cold, hollow space inside me, as if what was left of my soul had burned away in that courtroom. As they took Valeria out, I stood, smoothed my jacket, and turned to Ruiz. He nodded, a brief smile passing not victory, but acknowledgement. Justice had started to move. Cold air met us outside. I looked up at the sky, where the clouds were beginning to break, a thin strip of light after the rain. Across the street, the ocean murmured, waves lining up to crash white against the rocks. For the first time in weeks, my heart beat normally. Not fast, not erratic, just sure. I spoke softly, as if Miguel could hear. "See, son? Justice took its first step, and I'm still here to carry the rest for you." My anger wasn't blazing anymore. It had cooled into steel, cold, bright, and sharp. Justice doesn't need flames to burn. It only needs someone steady enough to keep the flame from going out. That was how I chose to honor my son, not with a headstone, but with lives saved from his pain. I used what remained after the court freeze and launched the Miguel Foundation for low-income cancer patients abandoned by family. Ruiz handled the legal work. Javier sent a message. "You've turned pain into a mission." Miguel would be proud. In the first week, the foundation covered meds and beds for 12 people. I went with the volunteer team through each ward, signing small invoices with a heavy heart. Every room smelled the same: medicine, rusty metal, and despair. Every face looked the same, tired, quiet, longing for a hand to hold. One afternoon, while I reviewed the new patient list, the head nurse called me over. "Mrs. Valentina, we have a new boy." "No family," records say orphan. "He's quiet, very polite." I followed her to room 214. The door was ajar, weak light slipping past a pale green curtain. On the bed, a tiny boy lay curled up, head bald, skin so pale it was almost see-through. When I stepped closer, his dark eyes opened wide, bright and unbearably sad. "Hi there," I said softly. "I'm Valentina." He nodded a little, voice just a breath. "Ma'am, do I have to stay here all by myself forever?" That question sliced right through me. I saw Miguel again in my mind, my son on that hospital bed, alone, with no one there. I sat down and took the small hand in mine. "No, sweetheart," I said. "From now on, you'll never be alone again." The file said his name was Diego Morales, 8 years old, leukemia, parents killed in a crash last year. He'd been moved from a group home when his condition worsened. No visitors, no one paying the bills. I signed the treatment funding paperwork to cover all of his costs through the foundation. Then I hired a private nurse to care for Diego and ordered the snacks and comic books he liked. Every time I came, he gave me a small smile and said shyly, "Ma'am, I feel better today." I smiled and patted his head. "Good job, little soldier." A week later, Diego started getting used to the long infusions. I went to the hospital every afternoon and sat reading to him. One day, when I reached the part where the boy in the story finds his mother again, Diego gently interrupted, "Ma'am, is Miguel somewhere up in the sky too?" I froze, then nodded, my voice tight. "Yes, sweetheart, Miguel is in a very bright place, and I'm sure her son is looking down at you and smiling." He smiled small, but it lit up the whole room. In that moment, I heard Miguel's laughter drift back, warm and close like a breeze. I understood that some things are lost but never truly disappear. They return in another form, gentler, softer. Every time I looked at Diego, I felt I was seeing the kindest part left in this world. He was fragile but always tried not to complain. When the nurse came to give a shot, he held my hand and whispered, "Ma'am, I'm not scared. I'm strong." I turned away to hide my tears. His words were like a small hand lifting me out of my own abyss. One afternoon, with the last sunlight slanting through the window, Diego lay on his side holding the comic I'd just bought. He looked up and spoke in a voice light as wind. "If I get better, can I help you take care of the others?" I smiled softly and touched his cheek. "You don't have to promise anything, Diego. Just having you here already helps me." From that day on, I didn't go to the hospital carrying grief, I carried comfort. I sat by his bed for hours, coloring with him, telling stories, and sometimes just sitting quietly watching the rain outside the window. Once, he fell. Asleep on my arm, breathing steady, face so peaceful I forgot there were ventilators, disinfectant, and the steady beeping of a heart monitor all around us. I took a photo and kept it on my phone. In it, Diego is smiling, bright eyes, a gap-toothed grin, just like Miguel at 8 years old. Whenever my screen lights up, I hear that laugh, the laugh I thought I'd never hear again. One morning, just as the sun broke through, a nurse called me. "Diego wants to see you." I hurried over. Diego was propped up in bed, holding a box of crayons. He spoke, weak but clear. "I drew you." On the paper were 2 people, one big, one small, holding hands under the sundae. Under the drawing, he'd scrawled, "Miss Valentina and me, no one gets left alone." I hugged him tight. The drawing blurred with my tears. Maybe that was the first time my tears felt warm instead of bitter. That day, leaving the hospital, I walked past the Coronado shoreline. The water rippled, the breeze was light, the salty air mixed with jasmine from the yards. I lifted my face to a clear sky, white clouds curling around a far peak, light spilling through like a ribbon. Inside me, an empty space had been filled not by justice or victory, but by a child who carried light. Diego made me understand that sometimes the only way through loss is to give away what love you have left. And in every one of his smiles, I heard Miguel's laugh again, gentle, clear, and never-ending. A month after the first hearing, San Diego's rain had eased. The sea was calmer, the waves lapping the shore like they, too, were settling after days of storms. I sat in a small room overlooking Coronado Bay, early light catching the new wooden sign on the wall. Miguel Foundation, for those left behind. That was how I chose to remember my son, not with a headstone, but with other lives saved from his pain. From what was left after the court's freeze, I built the Miguel Foundation, a way to keep his heart beating in others. In the first week, the foundation covered meds and beds for 12 people. I went with the volunteers to each unit, signing small hospital vouchers with a heavy heart. Every room had the same smell: medicine, rusty metal, and despair. Every face looked the same: tired, quiet, and longing for a hand to hold. One afternoon, as I was reviewing the new patient list, the head nurse called me over. "Mrs. Valentina, there's a new little boy." "No family," records say, "orphan. He's quiet, very polite." I followed her to room 214. The door was ajar, weak light seeping through a pale green curtain. On the bed lay a tiny boy, curled up, head bald, skin so pale it was almost transparent. When I stepped closer, his dark eyes opened wide, bright and unbearably sad. "Hi there," I said softly. "I'm Valentina." He nodded slightly, voice barely a breath. "Ma'am, do I have to stay here all by myself forever?" That question sliced through me. I saw Miguel again in my mind, my son on that hospital bed, alone, with no one there. I sat and took that small hand in mine. "No, sweetheart," I said. "From now on, you will never be alone." The file said his name was Diego Morales, 8 years old, leukemia, parents killed in a car crash last year. He'd been moved from an orphanage when his condition worsened. No visitors. No one paying the bills. I signed the treatment sponsorship to cover all his costs through the foundation. Then I hired a private nurse to care for Diego and ordered the snacks and comic books he liked. Every time I came, he gave me a small smile and said shyly, "Ma'am, I feel better today." I smiled and patted his head. "Good job, little soldier." A week later, Diego started getting used to the long infusions. I went to the hospital every afternoon and read to him. One day, when I reached the part where the boy in the story finds his mother, Diego gently interrupted, "Ma'am, is Miguel somewhere up in the sky too?" I froze, then nodded, my voice tight. "Yes, sweetheart. Miguel is in a very bright place, and I'm sure her son is looking down at you and smiling." He smiled small, but it lit up the whole room. In that moment, I heard Miguel's laughter drift back, warm and close like a breeze. I understood that some things are lost but never truly disappear. They return in another form, gentler, softer. Every time I looked at Diego, I felt I was seeing the kindest part left in this world. He was fragile, but always tried not to complain. When the nurse came to give a shot, he held my hand and whispered, "Ma'am, I'm not scared. I'm strong." I turned away to hide my tears. His words were like a small hand lifting me out of my own abyss. One afternoon, with the last sunlight slanting through the window, Diego lay on his side holding the comic I'd just bought. He looked up and spoke in a voice light as wind. "If I get better, can I help you take care of the others?" I smiled softly and touched his cheek. "You don't have to promise anything, Diego. Just having you here already helps me." From that day on, I didn't go to the hospital carrying grief, I carried comfort. I sat by his bed for hours, coloring with him, telling stories, and sometimes just watching the rain outside the window. Once, he fell asleep on my arm, breathing steady, face so peaceful I forgot about the ventilators, the disinfectant, and the steady beeping of the heart monitor. I took a photo and kept it on my phone. In it, Diego is smiling bright eyes, a gap-toothed grin, just like Miguel at 8 years old. Whenever my screen lights up, I hear that laugh, the laugh I thought I'd never hear again. One morning, just as the sun broke through, a nurse called me. "Diego wants to see you." I hurried in. Diego was propped up, holding a box of crayons. He spoke, weak but clear. I drew you. On the paper were two people, one big, one small, holding hands under the sundae. Under the drawing he'd scrawled, "Miss Valentina and me, no one gets left alone." I hugged him tight. The drawing blurred with my tears. Maybe that was the first time my tears felt warm instead of bitter. That day, as I left the hospital, I walked past the Coronado shore. The water rippled. The breeze was light. The salty air mixed with jasmine from the yard. I looked up at the clear sky, white clouds curling around a far peak, light spilling through like a ribbon. Inside me, an empty place had been filled not by justice or victory, but by a child who carried light. Diego made me understand that sometimes the only way through loss is to give away what love you have left. And in each of his smiles, I heard Miguel's laugh again, gentle, clear, and never-ending. 3 months later, Diego was cleared for discharge. Doctor Patel smiled as he handed me the home care approval. "He's recovering well, Valentina. Now he just needs a warm place to grow." I looked down at Diego, his eyes sparkled like morning waves, cheeks pink again. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "Ma'am, let's go home." I nodded, my throat tight. Those 2 words, "go home," had never meant more. That afternoon I drove Miguel's old pickup, the one I hadn't had the courage to touch before. In the passenger seat, Diego hugged his brown teddy bear, legs swinging, eyes on the window. Sunlight washed over his face, lighting each fine strand of hair. In his gaze, I saw Miguel at 8 sitting just like that beside me on his first trip to the beach. The little house by the water where Miguel had lived sat on a quiet street, bougainvillea spilling over the porch. I once thought I'd never return. It held too much pain. But today, when I opened the door, the darkness wasn't there. Afternoon light poured through the windows, laying across the patched walls as if the house itself was breathing again after being forgotten. "You can choose your room," I said, setting the keys on the wooden table. Diego looked around and pointed to the small room at the end of the hall. "I want this one. It smells like the ocean." It was Miguel's room. I stood still. The old paint peeled. The curtains still creased from the day I left. But Diego's eyes held something that softened me, the eager look of a child who finally had a place to call home. That evening I brought out brushes and a can of ocean blue paint, the color Miguel loved, and started rolling it over the walls. Diego stood beside me, grinning, hands smudged with paint. "I can help, right?" I laughed. "All right, little soldier." We worked until nightfall. When the light clicked on, the room wore a new coat, soft blue, the smell of paint blending with sea salt and jasmine from the porch. I set Miguel's framed photo back on the shelf, the one from his officer graduation, pride shining in his face. Diego stared at it a long time, then gently placed his teddy bear beside it. "Would he like me?" he asked, voice tiny. I smoothed his hair and answered, "He'd be very proud, Diego." "Because you're brave and you know how to love." He smiled, eyes bright in the warm yellow light, the kind that made the house feel truly warm for the first time in years. That night I cooked our first meal in a kitchen that hadn't seen steam in a long time. I chose tacos, Miguel's forever favorite. As a kid, he wanted tacos every Sunday and always told soldier stories between bites. I folded each shell and sat Diego at the table. He took a bite, eyes lighting up. "This is so good, ma'am." I laughed. "From now on, every Sunday is taco day. Deal?" Diego nodded, mouth full, making me laugh until tears came. After dinner, we sat on the front porch. A thin crescent moon hung over the water, waves tapping like a steady heartbeat. Diego leaned on my shoulder and whispered, "I like it here. The waves sound like a lullaby." "Me too," I said, squeezing his hand. "This used to be Miguel's home. Now it's ours." In the days that followed, life slipped into a new rhythm, not loud, not tearful, just small moments that meant everything. Each morning I woke early, brewed coffee and warmed milk for Diego. When the sun crested the ocean, I took the kayak out while he ran along the wet sand, his small feet leaving a long trail of prints. From a distance, I heard his laughter carried on the wind. That sound, innocent, clear, softened my heart. I didn't feel alone anymore. It seemed like with every wave that hit the shore, Miguel sent a little piece back to me. In the late afternoons, Diego and I sat on the porch, coloring the drawings he made at the hospital. One day, he drew me silver hair flying in the wind, a paddle in my hand on the open water. He put the crayon down and whispered, "Ma'am, you look like a superhero." I laughed and smoothed his hair. "No, son, I'm just an old soldier learning how to love life again." At night, the house grew unusually quiet. Warm yellow light slipped through the curtains, falling across his small, sleeping face. I stepped softly into the room, pulled the blanket up for him, and stood there a long time. Diego shifted, opened his eyes, and mumbled, "Sleepy. Miss Valentina, can you be my grandma?" The question tightened my chest. I bent down, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "From now on you have a family, Diego. And I'll be your grandma, if you want." He smiled in his sleep, lashes fluttering, then drifted into a deep rest. I sat beside him, listening to that steady breathing blend with the distant surf. The room glowed with a warm gold, the scent of fresh paint mixing with the ocean smells of a beginning, of new life. I looked around, Miguel's photo on the wall, the teddy bear beside it, the bedside lamp casting a gentle glow. In that space, past and present folded into each other, making a real home. No more sorrow, no more loss, only the breath of two souls who had found each other in a wide world. I understood that some wounds can't be healed by medicine or time. They only close when we open the door and let someone in, someone small enough, pure enough, to remind us there is still something worth loving. That night, when I turned off the light, the moon still shimmered outside the window, laying a silver band across Diego's bed. I whispered, as if speaking to Miguel, "Son, I kept my promise. I came home, and I'm not alone anymore." The far-off waves answered softly, like a gentle good night. In that old house, under a ceiling washed in gold, I felt a true healing born not of justice but of love. A child had stepped into my life like a small lantern, and that light was enough to drive out every shadow I had carried. One late autumn morning, with a salty breeze blowing in from the sea, I received an envelope with no return address. The handwriting was messy, familiar enough to chill me. I opened it. Inside were only a few lines. "Valentina, I know I was wrong, but I have nothing left. I just need a little money to pay off debts and leave this place. Please think of Miguel. I won't bother you again." No real apology, not a single line about the pain she caused. Just cheap words wrapped in fake pleading, as if money could erase everything. I sat still for a long time, staring at the paper. Outside, the waves kept rolling in, spilling over the sand and slipping back, leaving white foam that vanished quickly. I folded the letter and tucked it into the thick case file. I still kept the evidence that had exposed Valeria's true face. She didn't deserve an answer. That afternoon, Ruiz called. His voice was low but more at ease than usual. "Valentina, the court rejected her appeal. All the evidence still stands. She has no more options." I exhaled softly and looked at Miguel's photo on the wall. "Thank you, Ruiz. I don't need her to suffer more punishment. I just need her kept away from anything Miguel left behind. You know," he said, "most people come here chasing a win. I think you're chasing peace." I smiled faintly. "Justice isn't the sound of a gavel, Ruiz. It's being able to sleep without hating anyone." When the call ended, I stepped onto the porch, sea wind lifting my silver hair. Diego sat in the yard, carefully sticking round labels onto each medicine bag, the care packs the Miguel Foundation was sending to patients in remote areas. On each sticker he'd scrawled with a colored pen, "Be brave. All done, ma'am." Diego shouted, cheeks flushed from the sundae. I walked down and looked at the neat row of bags, my heart softening. You did great, Diego. We're going to carry hope much farther. Since the hearing ended, the Miguel Foundation had grown faster than I imagined. Ruiz linked me with medical groups, and Javier helped run the mobile care program, sending medical vans to remote places where patients couldn't reach the city. Diego and I often joined the first runs. We handed out medicines, warm blankets, and simple meals to people fighting illness. Some gripped my hand, trembling, some just bowed quietly in thanks. Each time I felt a bit lighter. One day, at a small mountain hospital, Diego gave me the last sticker. He spoke with surprising seriousness. "This one's for you. You have to be brave too." I laughed, and tears still spilled. I stuck it on the ambulance right next to the Miguel Foundation logo. That tiny yellow circle shone under the sun, a reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward anyway, even after loss. That night, back home, I opened my laptop to write a post for the Foundation's website. I meant to share updates, but my hand started typing something else. I titled it Miguel's Legacy. I didn't write about the trial, about Valeria, or the dark days. I wrote about Miguel, my son, who laughed at the waves, who shared his last taco with his mom, who dreamed of helping others while he lived. I wrote that sometimes kindness can grow out of betrayal if we have the patience not to let hatred consume us. The post ended with a simple line: "Justice isn't only punishment. True justice is helping someone keep living with faith, with a hand to hold, with a smile." I posted it at midnight. The next morning, my inbox overflowed. "Your story made me want to call my mom right now. I thought I could never forgive, but now I see forgiveness is the only way not to carry the weight forever. Miguel is gone, but through you, he's still saving people." I read each message, tears falling while my heart warmed. I didn't feel the same loss anymore. It was as if Miguel still lived, just in another form, through the people the Foundation touched, through the smiles, and through Diego, the child who brought light back into my life. In the afternoon, Diego ran into my office holding a phone. "Ma'am, we have 200 more donors. They said your post made them cry." I patted his head and smiled. "It's okay. Tears are one way people find their hearts again." I looked out the window. The sky was pale gold, the waves curled softly, and sunlight fell across Miguel's photo. It lit the "Be Brave" sticker on the desk, making it sparkle like a tiny star. In that moment, I knew the past had finally stepped back. Valeria might still exist somewhere, a drifting shadow, but she no longer had the power to define my life. I chose another road, not living to seek revenge, but living to give. And every time I see Diego smile, I hear a familiar voice inside me, deep, gentle, like wind from the far horizon. "Mom, I'm proud of you." I lifted my head and smiled. Outside, the blue sea never stopped moving, like life itself, always continuing, no matter how much loss lies behind. That morning in La Paz blazed with Sunday the County. Courthouse opened early. A few reporters outside. Camera shutters clicking. I stepped out of the car with my old leather case of files. On my lapel, I pinned my Marine Corps service medal, not to show off, but to remind myself I've been through worse battles than this. This was the final hearing, to determine all assets and Valeria Cole's civil liability. Nearly a year since Miguel died, the truth was about to settle. Ruiz walked beside me, steady and unhurried. "Today is the last chapter," he said, "and I promise justice won't miss a thing." The courtroom was larger than before, more crowded, yet strangely quiet. Valeria sat at the defense table in a plain black dress, hair messy, face pale with powder. She was no longer the proud woman from the yacht, only a shaky shadow of herself trying to look composed. When the judge called us to order, Ruiz rose, his voice ringing clear in the solemn room. "Your Honor, Today we present a money flow chart, proof of the defendant's pattern of misusing and appropriating assets. On the big screen, arrows linked transfers, invoices, and the dates Miguel was hospitalized. Ruiz pointed to each line. April 10th yacht charter Ocean Queen, $48,000. Same day, Miguel Cole is admitted to the ER for internal bleeding. April 15th. Cartier jewelry purchase, $22,000. That day, the patient began to slip into a coma. April 18th cash withdrawal of $70,000 at 3 p.m. At 7 p.m. And the same day, he passed away. Each figure landed like a blade in the silence. I heard murmurs behind me, but inside, only my heartbeat remained slow, steady, unshaken. Ruiz turned. We call our first witness Mrs. Teresa Montoya, the Coles neighbor. Teresa walked to the stand, small but steady. Her voice trembled slightly, yet every word was clear. I lived next door for over 10 years. In those last weeks, Miguel was skin and bone, coughing blood. But Valeria was gone all the time. I knocked once. He cracked the door and said, "She's busy." I didn't expect to hear the next day he was gone. The room fell silent. Valeria dropped her head, fingers interlocked, knuckles white. Ruiz thanked Teresa, then signaled the next witness. Dr. Julian Patel stepped up with the chart. He looked straight at the judge, voice calm but heavy. I confirm the patient was admitted severely anemic and exhausted, but his life could have been extended at least a year with proper treatment and consistent care. No one visited. No one signed consent for a transfusion. He died alone. I bowed my head. The old images returned. The white ICU, the ventilator's hiss, my son's hand growing cold in mine. But I didn't cry. My tears had turned to steel long ago. Ruiz faced the bench, voice low. "Your Honor, we are not here for revenge. We are here to show that neglect can kill, and sometimes it is the cruelest crime." The judge studied the file for a long moment, then struck the gavel 3 times, voice firm and final. The La Paz court orders. Seizure of all assets belonging to the defendant, Valeria Cole, including real property, bank accounts, and investments. Transfer of estate management and related funds to the Miguel Foundation, administered by Mrs. Valentina Cole. Permanent prohibition against the defendant's access to or interference with said assets. The gavel echoed like a bell closing a chapter. Valeria burst into tears, shouting, voice ragged, "No! You don't understand! I just wanted a better life!" She collapsed into the chair, face contorted, makeup streaked. But there was no remorse in her eyes, only the fury of someone who'd lost it all. 2 officers helped her from the room. I didn't watch. I lifted my eyes and met Ruiz's. He gave a small nod, the sign of a victory that didn't need celebration. Outside, the La Paz sun was so bright I squinted. Wind swept dry leaves along the steps. I paused, touching the silver medal on my chest, the metal flashing in the light. I whispered, barely loud enough for myself, "Son, I kept my word. Justice was done, and I'll keep living for you not in hatred, but in the light." I looked up. The sky was a clean, endless blue, and in the sea breeze I thought I heard Miguel's voice, deep, gentle, "Mom, I'm proud of you." I smiled and nodded. Then I turned and walked toward the ocean, where the light never goes out. 6 months after the final hearing, La Paz skies were scrubbed clear. The sea breeze no longer tasted bitter, only sweet, like a new beginning. "That morning, Doctor," Patel called, his voice carrying a rare joy. "Valentina, Diego is completely in remission. His blood work is clean, no sign of relapse." I sat quietly on the porch, the phone trembling in my hand. My eyes blurred, not from pain, but from knowing that sometimes miracles are real. Diego came running over, hair messy, holding a kite painted with a blue fish. "Grandma, I can go back to school." I hugged him tight, listening to that small, steady heartbeat in his chest. Yes, son, this is the real miracle. In the days after, Diego and I fixed up the house together. We painted the walls a sandy yellow and planted bright red bougainvillea along the porch, the flower Miguel once called the color of Mom's smile. Diego loved painting, so he drew everywhere: the sun, ocean waves, even a giant whale across the kitchen wall. I couldn't bring myself to paint over it. In every clumsy line were laughter and a childhood being given back to a kid who had fought so much darkness. On the living room wall, I hung 2 frames, one of Miguel, one of Diego. 2 faces, one gone, one growing, both looking toward the sunlit window. Between them, I saw myself. Someone who spent nearly half a life learning that coming home isn't returning to a place, it's finding the freed "I love you" once forgot. In the mornings, I kept my routine of kayaking. Diego stood on the shore, waving his arms wildly. "Grandma, hurry, a fish is chasing you." I looked back and laughed, water splashing up around the paddle. His laughter mixed with the waves and carried all the way to the horizon. I can't remember the last time I laughed that freely. At night, we fired up the grill on the porch. The smell of charcoal, the sear of meat, the wind hissing through the trees, everything blended into the familiar sound of a real home. On the table, I set Miguel's photo, as if he were still there sharing dinner with us. Diego looked at the picture and whispered, "Grandma, I think he's smiling." I answered softly, smiling in the warm light. "So am I, Diego." We sat a long time, watching the moon rise over the water. I told him about my old patrols at sea, about long nights on watch in big storms, and about how a soldier learns that fear never disappears, you just learn how to live with it. Diego listened, his head on my shoulder, and said quietly, "Grandma, I'll be brave like you." I laughed and smoothed his hair. "You don't have to, son. Just be kind. That's enough." That night, when the house fell quiet, I looked around. Light spilled through the window and washed over the 2 photos side by side. My heart felt strangely peaceful, as if every bitter twist in my life had led me back to this moment. I knew I had finally, truly come home, not just to an old house, but to the part of my heart I'd once lost. My story isn't only about fighting for justice. It's about learning to forgive others and myself. And I know there are many mothers out there like me, betrayed, grieving, yet choosing love over hate. Thank you for staying with me to the very end. I believe if you're hearing this, you probably believe what I do, that justice and kindness can walk together. I'd love to know where you're watching from, what city, what country. Please share in the comments so I can see how far Miguel and Diego's journey has traveled. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share so the light of compassion can reach a little farther. I'm Valentina, and this is how I keep my promise to always come home.